first grade. We're going to talk this week about how animals grow. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite springtime animals. Really, they're out more than just in the spring, but this is when we really get to see them grow. I'm going to read Frogs by Gail Gibbons. Again, my favorite author. I told you she teaches us so much about new things. So frogs, let's see how they grow. Do you think it'll be like a plant? Do you think frogs start as a seed? Probably not, right? Let's see what happens. A breeze ripples the surface. The floating clump of eggs is called frog spawn. Frogs lay their eggs in water or wet places. Otherwise, the eggs could dry up and die. So frogs lay eggs. Here's what their group of eggs or their frog spawn look like. They lay them in a big group. And usually if you were looking in the water, you would just see some little black dots. It'd be kind of hard to see the white parts around them. These eggs do not have shells. They are inside jelly-like coverings. As they float, the jelly lets the sun's warmth come through to the eggs inside. Not all the eggs will survive. Most of the time, the large and slimy mass of eggs is too slippery and too big to be eaten. This is nature's way of protecting them. But some of the smaller clusters of eggs will be eaten by creatures living in or near the pond. So you can see this fish found a few that broke off from the big clump and they're eating them. The dark centers of the eggs slowly grow into frog embryos. The embryos grow until they look like small tadpoles. Tadpoles are frog babies. As they grow, they feed off their own egg yolks. So you can kind of see the insides are changing a little bit. I see some little tails, and they can live off that jelly-like substance until they're ready to hatch. The tadpoles grow until they are big enough to break free into the water. It can take from 3 days to 3 weeks for this to happen, depending on what kind of frogs they will become. So here they come, breaking out of their eggs, kind of like when the chicks do it, huh? One by one, the tadpoles hatch from their eggs. They each have a head, tail, and body. The tadpoles wiggle their tails to swim. They don't look much like frogs right now, do they? They look more like fish. The tadpoles breathe by getting air from the water through feathery outside gills. As they swim, they eat very small plants that stick to larger water plants. These tiny plants are called algae, so it almost looks like they're eating the dirt off the plant. 1 week later, the tadpoles look very different. They are bigger. Their gills begin to shrink. A flap of skin slowly grows over them. The tadpole's mouth becomes hard with tiny teeth in their upper jaws. Now the tadpoles are 1 month old. Their outside gills have disappeared. New gills inside the tadpoles take oxygen from the water. Their tails are wider for stronger swimming. Something wonderful begins to happen. At the base of their tail, bulges appear. This is where their hind legs are growing. So you can kind of see those little bulges. They don't have any legs yet. That's where they're going to be. At 2 months old, the tadpoles dart about the pond as they eat. They are still vegetarians. Vegetarians only eat plants. The tadpoles get bigger. Now they have hind legs. Behind their head, bulges appear. What do you think is going to grow there? Their front legs, yeah. So they look pretty silly right now. They just have back legs and still their tails. Their tails become smaller. The tadpoles' gills inside their bodies are gone. They have grown lungs to use for breathing, just like our lungs. Now and then they wiggle to the surface to breathe in air. The tadpoles are about 3 months old. Again, they look different. They have front legs. Their tails are even smaller. They have shed their tadpole skin and lips. At last, they have the wide mouths of frogs. So they still have a little bit of a tail, but they're starting to look more and more like frogs, aren't they? The tadpoles have become tiny frogs. They climb out of the pond and onto the land. Their tails will become smaller and smaller until they finally disappear. The tiny frogs begin to eat insects and worms. They aren't vegetarians anymore. Frogs are amphibians. The word amphibian comes from a Greek word that means two lives. An amphibian can live on the land or in the water. So two lives is what the word amphibian means, kind of like when they lived in the water and then when they lived on the land. Frogs are cold-blooded. That means their inside body temperatures are about the same as the outside temperature. During the next few years, the tiny frogs will grow to be mature frogs. Then they will be able to make their own frog spawn, and there will be new baby frogs. Frogs have many body parts. So here it shows their skin, their back legs, their 5 toes, but their feet are webbed. That means they have skin between each one. Their front legs are not webbed. They have 4 toes there. Their tongue is attached to the front of their mouth and it's sticky. Why do you think a tongue would need to be sticky for a frog? Yeah, it helps them catch their food. They have eyes, ears, and their nostrils are very little in the front. And they have teeth. Frogs don't hunt for food. Their big eyes are on top of their heads so they can see all the way around. They stay very still. When something flies or crawls nearby, their long sticky tongues dart out to catch it. They swallow their food whole. Frogs that swim use their powerful back legs and webbed feet to push them through the water. Frogs have 2 sets of eyelids. One set is transparent so they can see through them. When frogs dive, they close these eyelids to protect their eyes. On land, the frogs hop about. They use their very strong back legs to leap. Most frogs can jump 10 times their body length. They are wonderful jumpers. Frogs have enemies. Foxes, snakes, rats, birds, and other creatures eat frogs when they catch them. A sudden leap is a quick escape from danger. For protection, some frogs have skin glands that make them taste bad or make them poisonous. Sometimes their skin color hides them from their enemies. This is called camouflage. Frogs make different sounds. Often, boy frogs call their mates this way. They pull air into their sacs at their throats. The air sacs expand to look like bubbles. When frogs force the air out of their air sacs and into their lungs, the air passes over their vocal cords, which vibrates to make the sound. They make different calls that mean different things. Sometimes frogs are very loud. When it's cold in the winter, the frogs go to sleep. Sometimes they find sheltered hollows. Often frogs dig into the muddy bottom of a pond. All winter they sleep covered with mud. They stay completely motionless. Do you remember what we call that? Hibernation. In the springtime, when the sun begins to warm up the ground and the pond's water, the frogs come out of hibernation. They are healthy and hungry. People who know a lot about frogs are called herpetologists. They spend lots of time watching and waiting to learn more about these animals. Experts tell us there are more than 3,800 different kinds of frogs. Frogs play an important role in the balance of nature. They keep insects under control by eating so many of them. Also, frogs are food for other animals. Frogs are many different sizes, shapes, and colors. It's fun to learn about them. You can be a frog expert too. So here it kind of talks a little bit about the difference between frogs and toads. We said frogs lay their eggs in clumps. Toads lay their eggs in long strings, so a little bit different. Frogs have smooth, moist, soft skin, where toads have bumpy or thick skin too. We said frogs could jump really far, and a toad just makes short little leaps. He has shorter legs. He also has no teeth, where a frog has teeth. So a little bit different. And toads only live on land. So there's some differences for you. So let's take a look at how a frog grows. Remember we said that the frog starts as eggs. Next we get the tadpole. Then our froglet, remember he looks like a frog but he still has that tadpole tail. Then a mature frog or an adult frog who lays more eggs. So that's our frog life cycle. I hope you enjoyed learning about them. Tomorrow we'll learn about another animal. See you guys tomorrow.